Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick with us a couple of seconds and we will talk about the 9 clues that aren't in Forrest Fenn's treasure poem.
And we're back.
Your conditioner just went on.
Yeah, I know, but you were like, oh, it's so hot in here.
No, I was just talking about the fan.
See, I was going to turn that off, but no, it's so hot in here, so I left it on. Now it's got to go off. Anyway, take a moment and like this video with a thumbs up. Share it with your social media contacts. Let them know we are live and they can come and join us. And then make sure you have subscribed and click on the bell to receive notifications when we go live or release a new video. Next slide. And time for housekeeping. Housekeeping! Thank you to our moderators, Jimmy Fast, Joel Lewicki, Jason Eunice, Brian Eagle, and Eric Schmidt for being in our chat room, keeping it a safe place where everybody can express their opinion and nobody feels attacked for it. Our presentation today will be followed by an open Q&A, and Toby has an announcement.
Open Q&A and what else? Oh, I'm going to cover that in just a minute.
Yes.
So I promised Copper Dan that we would make an announcement regarding his product today. So this is the new product that he and his wife announced. And I'm going to read the letter that he sent me verbatim so that I make sure I get all the information in correctly. He says, "Dear Shelley and Toby, my wife Frances and I have created a small piece with some of the elements of the chase. It has mountains, trees, and water. We have created a little Freudian slip there, huh? We have created a limited edition of 80 pieces. Each piece will be stamped with the numbers 0 to 80 and will come with a certificate of authenticity." Now, the next paragraph in this letter, he talks about the contest that they were going to have to name it, and that was done yesterday. And he made the announcement on Christie's show last night. So the winning name is Where Warm Waters Halt, and apparently Dan went through the trouble of having Fenn approve the use of that name for this piece of art. 2 different people suggested the name, so each will get one of the 80 pieces. The prize for having named it, given it the name that was selected was a piece, but as I said, 2 different people suggested the name, so Dan is going to give 2 of the pieces to each of them. Each piece has to be handmade, however, we are able to closely replicate them all. The size of the piece is 8 inches wide by 17 inches tall. We wanted to come up with a cost that is somewhat affordable for searchers. Normally, a piece this size sells for $140, but we are offering it at $100. Shipping cost, oh, that's a very nice discount. Shipping cost will be extra. In the United States, it will be $20. Outside of the U.S., I will have to calculate the cost. I will do my best to keep it low. We will be selling them via eBay, and he sent me a letter this morning saying that the art will go on sale on eBay on Wednesday, tomorrow. We will be selling them on eBay. To keep things fair, we have created a random drawing system to assign how numbered pieces are released. In other words, just because you were first to order one doesn't mean it will be number 1. We will make them as orders come in, so give us a few days after your order has been placed before we ship it. To view a good picture of the piece, go to our website, www.copperelements.info, and click on the limited edition tab. That is a good example of what the piece will look like. And of course, you can see an example in the photograph in our slide here. Dan says, "Good luck to all." Signed, Dan and Francis. So we saw Dan's pieces up close and personal when we were at the Jamie Jordan raffle drawing in Santa Fe at the Collected Works, and they're just beautiful. They're amazing pieces of work. And of course, he and Jason got along well because they're effectively more metalsmith, and Jason up until recently has strictly adhered to the Spanish Colonial Art Society requirement for just using tin, but I've always hoped that he'd be incorporating other metals as well, other metals as well, including copper and brass, and some of his more recent pieces. He's done that little by little. So he feels like he's kept the commitment that he had made early on in his life to the Spanish Colonial Art Society, and now is exploring the use of multiple metals in his work. So I'm looking forward to seeing those as well. So we're going to have open text. So let me go through that. 24/7, you can call and leave a voicemail. 24/7, you can send a text to our 1-800-947-1043. So 24/7, call and leave a voicemail. 24/7, you can text in. During the show, you can text in at any time. After we finish the presentation, I'll open up the phone lines, and if you want to call in, you can do that as well during today's show. And you can do that on Thursday's show and then our Friday night Fandango. So just give us a chance to get through the majority of the presentation before you start calling in, but we'll take calls today. Okay? Any questions?
You want me to look at the chat while you're doing the presentation?
Oh, yes. You want to do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll just hand this over to you. How's that? And it's fully charged, or it's at least 81% charged.
I can plug it in.
Okay. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
I have the other one. I should have just set the other one up on your side.
Yes.
That would have been smarter, huh?
Oh, well. We did that last week.
Mm.
We did that last week.
Okay. And if you want, I can actually connect this keyboard to that chat, so if you want to respond to something.
Yeah.
Middle tab on that.
Okay. I'm good. I'm good.
All right. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is run down what we call the 9 clues that aren't in Forrest Fenn's treasure poem. And these are, as usual, our opinions. They're the 9 clues that aren't in the poem that we've happened to incorporated into our solution. So they work for us. We thought we'd share them with you. There's going to be many, if not all of these that you haven't heard before. Did I say that right? There are many of these that you will have heard before. So it's not new stuff, but we thought we'd share with you how we've incorporated them into our solution. And of course, afterwards, once the phone line's open, you can call and ask questions about what we've done. The other thing that was in a August 28th Fenn Treasure Hunter show, they had requested some words from Forrest, and he wrote back and he said, talk about the one good clue that searchers could think of themselves but haven't. And for the most part, they focused on what was already in the poem and whether or not there was additional clues in the poem exclusive of the 9 clues that he has referred to that start with begin at where warm waters halt. On that night, I had a different take on it, and my take was, are there other clues? And indeed, you know, he's even called them that. He's not subtle about this. He's called them clues. He was on Good Morning America telling people.
Today's show.
Pardon me?
Today's show.
Sorry. Why do I always get that wrong?
I don't know.
He was on the Today Show giving out what he called clues until he got so frustrated with the process he stopped. But the nice thing about these clues, there's 2 really interesting things about the clues that he gives out that are not in the poem. Number one, there's no riddles. He's very clear about it. He's very open about it. Now, there's a lot left to interpretation, of course, but there's no trying to figure out how far too far to walk is. He just gives you the clue. And so I think it is wise for us to incorporate some of that into our theoretical solutions. The other thing that I noticed about these is he's very precise. There's a certain amount of, in the majority of them, I'd say, in 80% of them at least, there's a numerical precision. So I started looking for anything that Fenn said that had a number in it that stood out to me. And you'll see some of that in some of these 9 clues. All right? So we're going to count down from what we call what we call the 9 clues that aren't in Forrest Fenn's poem. And we're going to start at the bottom and work our way towards the front. Okay? So here we go. Questions before we start?
No.
Okay. Not in the poem, clue number 9. Please remember that I was about 80 when I made 2 trips from my vehicle where I hid the treasure. And this was on Dale Neitzel's site back in June of 2017 when he was asked to talk about safety. I think that was right after we lost, or we thought we lost another searcher, and he was asked to talk about safety. And again, there's this numeric precision. Remember that I was about 80. Well, it's not exactly precise, but it's close. And I made 2 trips from my vehicle to where I hid the treasure. So the implication of that is that when you're 80, you don't travel long distances. For any of you who have been boots on the ground, you know that at these altitudes, especially if you're coming from the flatlands, at these altitudes, walking around, you get pretty tired pretty quickly. Some of you will get headaches because of the lack of oxygen, et cetera, et cetera. You get thirstier. You use up. You require greater hydration. So he said he had
sunburned faster.
That's right. You get sunburned faster because the density of the air, the lower density of the air. So what he's telling us is that he didn't travel far when he made those 2 trips, and he did it in one afternoon. So if you count the afternoon from 12 to 6, and you assume that he spent the entire 6 hours doing that, which I don't believe he did, he had to make not 2 trips, he made 4 trips back and forth because he had to go down and back and down and back. And in each of those cases, he had to do it as an 80-year-old man in an area that an 80-year-old man could not only comfortably but safely walk. In addition to that, he was carrying a 20-pound load on his back, and the taller you are, the higher that 20-pound load is off the ground, the more likely it is to affect your stability. So he had to be even more cautious. So the result is that's when we started thinking about the size of our search area, and we got down, every time we talked about it more, our search area got progressively smaller. And of course, when we went out there and we started looking at the Rio de los Pinos, which is 7,000 to 8,000 feet in altitude, and no trails. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We started to realize you can't walk 20 miles. You're lucky at that altitude in that time, the 4 trips, if you can walk a mile in what is effectively the high mountain ranges. And you're not running, and at 80 he's not running, but even at 60 or 50 or 40, you're not running. You're moving at a moderate pace, maybe a mile to, if you're lucky, a mile and a half an hour. And you have to do that 4 times. So if you're doing a mile and a half an hour, you've now walked 6 miles. I'm going to strongly recommend to you that before you go out on your next boots on the ground attempt, or your first, whatever it is, go out and walk 6 miles on a pathway, on a walk, not in the mountains. Just walk 6 miles. And then imagine what it was like for an 80-year-old man to walk that same distance in the mountains. And you'll get a real sense of what potentially that distance is like in the mountains, and how close the treasure is from where he parked his car. So that was the first one. And that's not in the poem. Not in the poem, but in the book on page 131, just before he starts the poem, he says it's in the mountains somewhere north of Santa Fe. And this goes back to the idea that when Fenn got this idea, it struck me, and it probably struck him, I'm guessing, that it was something that he was going to do for his friends and acquaintances in Santa Fe. That's why his first inclination was to publish only 1,000 copies of the book and put it in the Collected Works bookstore. This was not a big production, with a major publishing house. It was his small publishing house, One Horse Land and Cattle Company, and he was going to publish 1,000. He was going to make a very small profit, of course, which he was going to turn over to Collected Works, and then and he was going to sell it there at Collected Works, so that the next time he met his friends at the Pink Adobe for cocktails or whatever they drank, they could all say, "Oh, Forrest, what a great book, and I'm going to go looking for your treasure." And indeed, if you look at the interviews that were done during that early period of the search, they are with people who were residents and business people in Santa Fe, and the kind of people that you would imagine were friends with Forrest Fenn. So the other half of this logic is, and I wrote a blog post on this several months ago, probably back at the beginning of the year, and the logic was, if I were to tell you that I kidnapped your cat and I hid your cat somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, would you go looking for your cat in Colorado, Wyoming, or Montana? It just didn't make sense to us. And that's one of the things that has led us to keep our search limited to New Mexico.
And my cat away from Toby.
I don't get it. It's funny though whenever I call Shelley, we're talking about business. Her cat's in the background. He's going wow, wow. It's just making all these noises like, how come I'm not on this call?
No, because he's heard about you.
No,
why are you talking to that bad man? He kidnaps cats, don't you know?
He kidnaps cats.
It's in the mountains somewhere north of Santa Fe.
Yep.
That would make a good T-shirt.
It would be. Oh, we do have a T-shirt. You'll find me in the mountains. We have a T-shirt on our Zazzle
Look for me in the mountains.
Look for me in the mountains somewhere north of
Santa Fe.
Yeah, with our Gypsy's Kiss logo. Not in the poem, clue number 7. The little girl in India cannot get closer than the first 2 clues. Now, he qualified that. The question was qualified. I'm sorry, the answer was qualified in the question, and he responded very precisely, very succinctly. But in the question, it was, the question included the qualifiers of with a good map and your poem. With your poem and a good map, how close could she get? The implication of this is that the first 2 clues will get you to a starting point, effectively, the intersection of where warm waters halt and canyon down, and then after that you have to be boots on the ground, and so it is hard for us to come to the conclusion that we can do this all from the seats in front of my desktop computer here and not ever have to go boots on the ground. In addition to that, other than my first attempt at all this on the Rio Chama, where I tried to drown my son, I have lost all sense that I can figure this out without actually being boots on the ground. And I think every searcher, it is my strong opinion based on, fact, on empirical evidence, that every searcher goes through that phase of reading the poem, deciphering it in their own mind, and then coming to the conclusion that they know exactly where the treasure is. Fenn has more often than not said, you can figure out with luck, and we're going to put a qualifier on that as well too, you can figure out with luck the first 2 clues, and then you effectively, although he doesn't say it in this response, you have to be boots on the ground. On the other hand, we have done presentations and made videos on visualization and how you visualize the additional clues. But again, you can never know if those visualizations are accurate if you don't actually put boots on the ground. No.
I like that he said 2 clues, not the first couple of clues.
Right.
You know how he is.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I mean. This is part of that thing that when he says these, when he gives you these clues, there's a certain amount of numerical precision in them. You're right. He doesn't say the first couple are clues or the ones after. He says there you can get to the first 2 clues, and then he doesn't say boots on the ground, but the implication is that you have to be boots on the ground. By the way, that is not actually the little girl in India. That is a little girl in India. Not in the poem, clue number 6. The first clue in the poem is begin at where warm waters halt. That's the first clue. If you can't figure that clue out, you don't have anything. And that was in the New Zealand radio interview of April of 2013, in which he made that statement, and it's a very powerful statement where he actually warns against, like, if you don't have this figured out, just what else is he said? Stay home and play canasta or whatever you're going to do, because if you can't figure that clue out, you don't have anything. And then the question becomes, what does figure out that clue mean? Does it mean that you have a good sense of what the temperature of warm waters are? Or that you can identify the location of that clue with geographic precision, because in our opinion, that's what he means. If you don't have your warm waters halt down to geographic position to at least 5 decimal points, you don't have anything. You have a good guess, and you have an interpretive response to the clue, and then you've got to go out boots on the ground and wander around effectively, looking for that point that you believe may be the point of where warm waters halt. It is with geographic precision. The geographic precision is required. Precision is required before you actually get.
Do you want a question that refers to the little girl from India?
Yeah, I'll take one.
Okay.
You got a question?
Sea Monkification wants to know, do you think the reason he said the little girl couldn't get closer with a map of the Rocky Mountains is because it isn't detailed enough? Could a localized map help solve the remaining?
I guess you could make that assumption, but that's not what he said. She's the qualifier that Jenny gave him was a map of the Rocky Mountains, and the implication is being again that if the little girl in India could find the first two clues on a map as low resolution as a map of the Rocky Mountains, that any of us could, and then after that. The implication of what you're saying is that all I need is a more resolute map, the more detailed map. Well, as far as I know, the more resolute maps, you are going to get a higher resolution of the area, and you may get some more detail. The question is whether it's a map or a satellite image of the area. What makes you think that you can actually pinpoint each of the following clues, unless you believe that the clues actually are represented on the map by some sort of marking on the map? Because maps are not while they are visual tools, they're not photographic tools. They are simply, topographic representations of an area, and unless your following clues, your Homer Brown actually has a little marker and a name next to it, as they are wanted to do on quads, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you to even guess. You have to be boots on the ground so that you can actually see and perhaps even touch each of those clues to be assured that is indeed what they are. So, did I do this one already? Beginner where warm water salt. Not in the poem, clue number 5. That sounds like 3 or 4 to me. And that was in response to an interview that was being done by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's program. What's the name of the program? They just celebrated their 50th anniversary. It's all about that or something.
About stories?
No, it's, I can't remember. Anyway, it's a program. They were interviewing Fenn on the subject of the treasure hunt. And at some point, Douglas, the gentleman who is the co-host on the show, recited the second stanza of the poem. He said, begin up where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, not far but too far to walk, and put in below the Homer Brown. And he says to Fenn, that sounds like a couple of clues to me. And Fenn responds very quickly, and without a lot of fanfare, he says, that sounds like 3 or 4 to me. And if you take him at his word, in this case, that it sounds like 3 or 4 clues, and you accept the higher of the two numbers, you then have to recognize that there are only 5 clues left after what's in the first stanza, and you can count your way through the second stanza, and you can count your way through the third stanza and find at least 3, maybe 4 more, leaving the last one in the second, third, fourth stanza. So that's hard for me to do in my head. So I thought it was significant in that what Fenn gave us an idea of was how tiny the description, the riddle of the description of each of the clues was. In some cases, it's one line in that particular stanza. In I think at least one other case, there's 2 clues in one line in order to make the 9 by stanza 2, 3, 4 and a half, or stanza 4, the first half of stanza 4. So it was very interesting to me that they were that concise in terms of their presentation to them, and of course that makes it even more difficult because they are riddles, and B, there's not a lot to work with. And take it in the canyon down, not far but too far to walk. These riddles, there's not a lot to work with, and so identifying them on a map, at that point it starts making sense to you. How do you identify those on a map and not have to be boots on the ground in order to do that? And again, these are all principles, if you will, that we've applied to our search strategies. We don't go unless we can identify with geographic precision where the intersection of warm water, salt, and canyon down, and we feel like we've got those first 2 clues, and then we want to be able to see whatever clues there are after that. Not in the poem. Clue number 4. People. So this is actually a compilation of a variety of things he said. He's never actually put these together in one paragraph. He said it at different times, but again, he uses the numbers, and he has this certain precision with them. People, not searchers, but people have been within 500 feet. Searchers have been within 200 feet. Searchers have figured out the first 2 clues and walked past the other 7. When you combine that with the other clue of having walked the 4 trips in one afternoon, you start getting a sense of how small the scale is for this potential search area, that he's not talking about making long drives and roaming over Yellowstone National Park to get to a point where you park your car and then follow the last 2 clues. You don't get to 2 clues. He's talking about searchers who have been within 200 feet and figured out the first 2 clues and walked past the other 7. They didn't drive, fly, or ATV past the other 7. So the implication is that if you're out in the field, you're out in the mountains, and you walk past 7 of the clues, you're not going 10 miles. You're just not traveling 10 miles to walk past 7 clues. So not in the poem clue number 3. This is one of those where I think he was giving it away to Good Morning America, and he had to Today Show.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Today Show. And this was a set of the clues that he was giving to them, and I think this was the one where he finally said, to heck with this, I'm not going to have these people invade my house anymore, because it was obvious that the producers of that particular program, the Today Show, had much greater expectations about the kind of clues that Fenn was going to provide, and obviously they didn't know Fenn. He's pretty tight-fisted with his clues, and they weren't going to get a lot out of him, although they probably believed that they were. But what interested me about this pair of clues was the 5,000 feet, and I think you can find quotes after this where he qualified the 5,000 feet by saying things like, "Hey, all the Rocky Mountains are above 5,000 feet, so I'm not giving you," he didn't say this, but it's the equivalent of, "So I'm not giving you anything." But the one that really intrigued me was when he used 10,200 feet, because it was a very precise number. He could have just as easily said, honestly, I don't think the treasure is above 10,000 feet. So you have to ask yourself once you hear it, why did he use 10,200 feet? Well, as most of you know who have seen a topographic map, there's contour lines on the map, and the thicker of the contour lines are made every 100 feet. So 10,200 feet is actually visible if the map represents an area that's at that altitude. You'll see 10,200 feet regularly on that topographic map if you happen to be using a topographic map that has those altitudes. And the reason is it's one of the main contour lines. They have primary and secondary contour lines. And in most quads, the primary contour lines are thicker lines made every 100 feet. So you'll see 10,200, and you'll see I've circled the 3 of them, 10,100, 10,200, and 10,300. Well, I started thinking maybe when he said below, he wasn't actually referring to an altitude. And again, because it was so precise, he could have said the treasure is below 10,000 feet, and in my opinion, he would have still been accurately representing where the treasure was, because while there are Rocky Mountains higher than 10,000 feet, he's not going to put people at that altitude, because that's the point. Generally speaking, you're either above or about to go above the tree line. Your oxygen is down to 60%, or your oxygen intake is down to 60%, and you're going to get at least a headache, and maybe worse. So it is not likely above 10,000 feet, so why not say it's below 10,000 feet? Why 10,200? But as I looked at the maps of our particular search area, I realized that could he have meant, as part of the clue, that the treasure is not in altitude below 10,200 feet, but perhaps in indication below the number 10,200. And it so happens that in our search area, there are two I don't want to call them mountains because it's hard. There are two high plateaus in that area in which 10,000, and they're exactly opposite one another. And then if you look even further west, there's a third, and they make a triangle. And the triangle is, I like to call it the Bermuda Triangle, because it really covers our search area, and we thought maybe there's something there, so that it is below 10,200 feet, but not in. He's not referring to altitude. So, yeah, question.
So, sorry.
Rick Plank, the one from Rick.
Into the. Oh.
That's right.
Okay, so Eric Schmidt put up the link for As It Happens.
Oh, okay.
The link for that because somebody was asking for that. And then he said to, if you haven't seen this already, and then he put up a link for Into the Forest. But I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Must be something new. Something new, maybe?
And Arrowhead Junction says, if Forrest insists on making a distinction between hints and clues, shouldn't we also?
I'm not sure. No, you're free to do what you want, right? If whatever, if Forrest makes distinctions because Forrest makes distinctions. Whether or not he's helping us is another question. I don't think it's Forrest. You know, Forrest has also said, "I've never said anything that's actually going to help a searcher get closer to the treasure." So, if I were to limit myself only to what Forrest says, I'm constraining the potential for what I have to find, and I have to be as open-minded. We have to be as open-minded as possible. So, I don't necessarily think that you have to do anything that Forrest Fenn tells you.
It's a choice.
It's a choice we make, yeah. So then one of the interesting clues that I found was the qualifying statement, there isn't a human trail in close proximity, and we are reminded that he misspelled proximity. We don't know if he did that on purpose, to where I hid the treasure, and he said that in Mysterious Writings in June of 2014. But to me, I thought it was interesting that he used the qualifier human trail, and I'm going to switch scenes here for just a second so that you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to transition back over here. So this is a satellite image of the area in which we are searching, and I hope you can see it on the screen. I know it'll be difficult. But this line right here is a fence line that protects one hunting area from another. That's actually in New Mexico. But I don't know whether you can see them, but there's trails here. And the trails are what I would call meandering. There's smaller versions here. There's other versions near the water. And you can see they're just, you know, this one is a little tiny square trail. But they're passable. You can walk on them. They are not human trails. They are animal trails. For the most part, they're made by cows, but the other animals in the area actually use the same trails. So there are no human trails in this area. There are simply animal trails that lead us all the way down towards the western approach to the Toltec Gorge, which is the area that we're most interested in. So the qualifier here was the human trails versus any other kind of trails. So I'm going to strongly recommend that if you have a particular search area that you're interested in, you've identified where your warm waters halt and your canyon down, that you look at a satellite photo and try to determine that if there are trails, and you're going to use the qualifier, there are no human trails, try to determine if those trails, and the reason you can tell is animals generally like shortcuts, right? So they could make 3 or 4 trails based on how they're feeling that day. And so it's not the one trail that you would look in Yellowstone and see the identified and named trail that is, you know, 4 or 5 feet wide and can handle multiple people and has handled millions of them. It's you see these tiny lines, these navigational lines that they're not quite Mandelbrot set in their placement, but they're mighty and varied and very visible. And you can say to yourself, those are not human trails. Those are animal trails, and those have not been disqualified. Okay, so last but not least, I don't know, we cannot ignore the fact that the phrase warm waters has, and will continue to be used for the foreseeable future in the New Mexico fishing regulations. The additional qualifiers are it's A, New Mexico, B, fishing regulations, C, Fenn was an avid fisherman, and D, the simple fact of the matter is that by using that definition, it gives you a precise location for the intersection of where warm waters halt and the canyon down. There are other states that use warm water. Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana all use warm water in their fishing regulations, but they always use it as a qualifier for warm water species. It is only in New Mexico that the phrase warm waters, the plural with the addition of the S, is used as opposed to the other states. So that for us has always been our number one clue, because it was the first one that came up for me back in 2013 and gave me the opportunity to do what Fenn told me to do, and that is, if you don't know where warm waters halt, don't waste your time going out and play some canasta. So those are the 9 clues we think that are not in the poem that we use to affect our solution for our theoretical solution for the treasure. I go back and then we'll come to that later. Okay, so let us go. I don't want to close that, do I? I'm going to transition out of this. I'm going to go back to full screen, and Shelly's going to go to the chat room. And while she's doing that, I'm going to open up the 1-800 phone line. You can see it on your screen there in the lower third beneath Shelly and I, 1-800-947-1043. That line is now open.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to let everybody in the chat room know, some of you who are new especially, if you are looking for quotes from Forrest and you want to know, did he say this or did he say that, one of the places that we always start with is terryscant.com, and you can type in the word that you're looking for and it will give you written up interviews, mysterious words, questions and answers, and pretty much anything you can find that Fenn has said will be quoted there, and you'll be able to highlight the word that you were looking for and read through that material. And then there's also a clickable link that will take you to where they found that information at. Sometimes it's in more than one place. So if you want to know, did he say human or man-made trail, you can go to terryscant.com. You can look up the quote for yourself and see exactly what he did say. And I just wanted to bring that up. And now, oh yes, and Eric has put the link in the description in the chat room.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Eric's been giving us all kinds of great information today. So let me get back up here at the top. A drag here. Okay. So Toby's phone line is open, and we're just going to start saying hi to everybody. But as I'm doing that, if you have a question you would like to call in, please do so.
Or send a text. You can use a text as well.
The 1-800 number on the screen is correct, right? So you can call that number or text it. So let's say hello to our friends in the room. We have Welder for Hire AJ, Sam Leno, Ataraxia, Cindy Guess, Tammy Mattis, Copper Dan, Dave Erickson, Journeyman, Brent from Austin, Texas, Belva Jenkins from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Eric Schmidt, Jimmy Fast, William Ortiz, Paul Ammons, Jay Stepp, which is Joe from Texas. Hello. Davio's here, Jeremy Milstead, Debbie Teal, Goldilocks, Sir Quaidum, Steve Smitherman, Has No Skill, that's a new name, David Dow, Jeep Girl Jody from Colorado, Maverick Searcher, Michael Cohn from North Carolina. Ataraxia says, I'm going to say she because it's ending with an A, but it could be a he, I don't know. Says, howdy from Talkeetna, Alaska.
Wow.
Talkeetna. Fibonacci's here. Osk Will from Missouri. Hello. Jason Eunice is here. Louis Luya from Houston. Matt from Georgia/Colorado. And let's see. Sledneck. Deborah Jensen from New Orleans. And Rick Plank from Cincinnati. Goldilocks. Oh, and Denise Bagley says, I appreciate Copper Dan wanting the personal information of the two who won the gorgeous art private. I'd like to say thank you, Copper Dan, for your generous gift. Yes, I am one of the two.
Oh.
So congratulations, Denise.
Congratulations, Denise. Very well done.
Alan Kay is here. Matt. Aaron Herlihy. Jason ICU. A t-shirt depicting a bag full of cats being carried north of Santa Fe.
That would be Toby.
By Toby. I have your cat. And he's ready.
Hide your cats.
And he's cutting out little magazine letters and I has cat. He speaks in lolcat.
Cat is mountains north of Santa Fe.
I has cat.
Hey, we got a call from Davio. Can I take it?
Yeah. I suppose you can.
I suppose I can.
Do you need my permission?
All right. Davio, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Yes, you can. Go ahead. What's your question?
Well, I was wondering, do you think it's potentially conceptual, this whole warm water halts? I mean, I don't think it's so one-to-one. I really found that it's a conceptual thing. When warm water halts, something begins. And I think this is where he's taking you, and that'll take you out of the literal sense of, one clue equals, bang, and then they're done with, and that's your answer. I definitely feel, and I have found successfully, that it's definitely, when warm water is halt, then cool water begins. Well, what does that mean? And that takes you to yet another answer. And that answer takes you to, let's say, a person, and this person takes you to a thing. And all of these things are relatable to the book if you if you read the book many, many, many times. I mean, a lot. Then that all becomes, logical.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm just saying that isn't it potentially less? It's more conceptual as opposed to literal in the poem. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do you not find that?
On behalf of the poem, and without trying to sound like I ignore all of those things, I think the matter is that if you take a line of a ratio between literal and conceptual, I think the more conceptual you interpret any one of these elements, the further away you get from the rational. And I think you create a sphere. And if you're second, if you do that to the second clue, because each time you interpret a clue in a more conceptual, less literal, or less figurative way, you just simply increase the odds. You change the odds, and they are not in your. Those odds are not in your behalf. I think at some point the line has to be closer to literal rather than conceptual, as you make the translation from the riddle. I mean, let's face it, you're starting with a riddle, and what you're trying to do is translate that riddle into something more literal, something that you can see or touch. I think if you're taking the riddle in each of the lines of the poem and making them further conceptual, I think you're hurting your chances of finding the treasure rather than locating it.
Well, then I guess that's true. Then it can be literal and conceptual both ways, in that if the warm water halts, something begins. So you can go off on that as opposed to just stopping at where warm waters halt and just kind of looking in water for a temperature.
Yeah.
So what it means is, yes, literally, the warm water halts, and then cool water begins, and then something else happens.
Right.
So, I mean, is that conceptual, or is that actually taking it literally? It's kind of a five-year-old way of looking at it.
No. That's a fair to do it. I think that's absolutely reasonable to say, well, if warm waters halt, can I then conclude, if what he said is that this is the location at which warm waters halt, could I then further conclude it's where cold waters or tepid waters or whatever begin? I think that's perfectly reasonable. The question then becomes, what are the possible choices, and how many options are you creating for yourself by giving yourself those choices, right? Rather than saying, warm waters halt, and warm waters are 104 degrees, right, Fahrenheit, then what happens? And we don't ask ourselves that question. We don't ask, then what happens?
Exactly.
We trust that the end point, or the end point for that particular clue, is where warm waters halt. Because the minute I ask myself, then what happens? Do cold waters begin? Do tepid waters, start? Whatever it is. Then I've just increased the confusion, the logical confusion of my solution. So we try to limit that and not incorporate it into the thinking.
Well, unless there was a key word that would keep you grounded in your answer.
Indeed, and there is for us, and I won't ask you yours if you don't ask me mine.
Correct. But I do like nudging people. I really enjoy nudging people into the direction where they can find said word. I definitely think that's kind of fun.
You know what? I think
it expands the conversation. I dare not speak this. I don't want to nudge too much until winter.
Yeah, I think that's how people take what you say and how you communicate in the chat room. So let me go on to my next question here, okay?
Very good, sir. Love you all. Cheers. Be safe.
Thank you, and thanks for calling in. Okay, I've got a bunch of text messages. Have you got some stuff in the room that you want to
I have something I want to say. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
That would be different.
Hey, you know what?
What?
You can do that now because you're connected. Sorry. All right.
So somebody in the chat room the other night, it might have even been last night, asked the question, where do warm waters halt? And I said, at the end. Now, you can say it's where cool waters begin, but that's an assumption. It doesn't mean it's correct. It's something that you've assumed, that you've stuck on there for your own purposes. I say they halt at the end. What does that mean? Well, maybe it could be like the sea shore comes up on the shore. That's where it ends, at the shore. It could mean a lot of things. Every one of those things is an assumption that particular person is making.
And changing the dimensions of their strategy, of their theory.
And, sorry, I have had something here. Oh, Jan Kerb. Jan Kerb says, what nobody gets about this quote is what are exactly the first two clues. Is Home of Brown part of it or not? So she was wondering about that, figured out the first two clues, but I think you kind of covered that when he said that 3 or 4 clues are in the first stanza.
Jan, in our opinion, the first two clues are begin at where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. That then you start counting the clues after that, and I think we covered that in one of the previous slides. Guys, remember that if you, I know what I'm missing, I forgot the smart chat thing, but that's okay. Remember, if you want us to see, it's easier to see your questions on my screen here than it is in the chat room. So make sure that if you have a question for us, precede the question with @AGK. If it's just a comment, you don't need to do that. If you have a question, to make sure that we get to the question, precede it with @AGK so we know
Actually,
it's
if
for
you
us.
just put the @ the letter A, and a space, and it should pop up as one of your options, and you
And
can
then
just
just
click on
select
it.
it. Yeah.
And you see Sea Monkey Vacation did that in the chat, and
And it
to
highlights it.
us, it highlights it. Okay. So did you have a text that you
I do.
wanted to get?
Yeah,
Okay.
you want to?
No.
So I've got
go
a
ahead.
text from, and do me a favor, when you send your text message in, at least use your first name and where you're calling from so that I can identify you. Question is, I've always thought that where warm waters halt is where a New Mexico water body crosses into Colorado. Well, smart thinking, brother. It's not actually a question, but here's a question from, okay, so again, don't forget to add your name so I can at least mention your name about your question when you send me the text. Has the warm waters map in the New Mexico fishing regulations changed from 2010 to now? Yes, it has. It changes, although there's a small change almost every year, depending on how they configure the fishing regulations. So it does change slightly. The area that we're searching in hasn't been impacted by the changes.
And hello, Gary Sandberg from Seattle. And 23 Monarcha.
So,
JRH.
question, what do you think he means by simplify? It's the definition of simplify. He doesn't want you to overcomplicate the poem, but at the same time, I've heard interviews in which he said you're oversimplifying. He's told people you're oversimplifying it. So the question is, what is the difference between simplifying and oversimplifying? And I don't think we have an answer to that. I think the challenge is whether or not you use logic and rationale to decipher the riddles and then translate those riddles into things that you can touch. That's as simple as we can make it. And I think that's what it takes to simplify it. Question from Brian Ulrich from New Jersey. Hi, Toby and Shelley. If some searchers have been within 200 feet yet walk past clues 3 through 9, how does not far but too far to walk apply? So we did a show on this a while back, Brian. The not far but too far to walk probably for us is the most difficult of riddles. But if you remember my folding space example, imagine if you were on one side of the river and the clue that you were seeking, the end of not far but too far to walk, was on the other side of the river. And you're not actually far from it, but it is too far to walk to it. You are separated by a river, so you have to make some other decisions about what you're going to do at that point. So that's the best we can come up with in terms of a solution to that very difficult riddle of not far but too far to walk. We do not think it's not far, so you have to fly, drive, swim, or anything else. We think it's just a matter of an indication of distance. And from the perspective of our particular solution, it turns out that if there is a point on the opposite side of the river in August, not that this river is ever fully, irrationally flowing, but in August you can literally walk across the river to that point.
And we have Sean Martinez and Jono Jones are in the chats. And Jason Eunice says, what do you think the value of the various Forrest Fenn streams, and I think he means videos, like collected works, is to the searchers?
I think it depends on the stream. There have been a couple that are nice in terms of understanding who Forrest is and what he's like. I think the most significant we've said before are the collected works done in October of 2013, Moby Dickens done in November of 2013, and the interview with Lorraine Mills, although it wasn't a stream. It was more scripted.
None of them were.
Yeah, pardon?
None of those were. But the
that's
two
right.
that you did were not edited. They
So
were just
so
videos.
I think the ask Jason's question again, please, so I make sure that he.
What do you think the value of those videos is to the searchers?
So every once in a while, he'll drop intelligence that might be useful to you in some of those. There is some of that in Moby Dickens. So I think there's that value. But I think even more value is, to me, in each of those cases where he was not being formally interviewed by, a large media property. It really is kind of Forrest Fenn at his rawest. He loves that kind of environment. He loves being challenged by the questioners and coming back with his answers that sometimes are, informative and sometimes are confusing. I think he loves that kind of environment. And to me, it's always been when he's at his least armed, the most disarmed. Now, that doesn't mean he's not answering, he's answering those questions with what he planned. He has always planned to answer those questions. When you hear the 80-year-old quote or the 200-foot quote, those are practiced responses. But in a lot of those cases, you can look at it and you can get a sense of whether or not this is the kind of man that A, could have hidden a treasure, B, could have written a poem with the clues necessary to find that treasure, and C, would or would not be excited if someone were to find that treasure while he was still living. That's what I think you get out of those videos, and I strongly recommend, we tell people that the 4 videos you have to watch are the Lorraine Mills interview, the collected works book signing, the Moby Dickens book signing, and the most recent video that Davio discovered from the Cody Museum done back in 2006. And the reason that's so important is because he was at his most disarmed, his most comfortable, and it was made before any of this happened. No treasure, no book. There was a plan in his head, but I think he's at his most vulnerable, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Do you have a text there?
It was from Jeff Nevada, Venger1 in chat. He was just telling me who I had asked who sent the text message.
Okay. Louis Luya wants to know, in The Thrill of the Chase, Lewis and Clark, he's telling us the chapter, Lewis and Clark, he uses the word man trail. What is that?
So I suppose a man trail, I'd have to assume that a man trail is the equivalent of what he refers to when he says there are no human trails. So a man trail and a human trail to me would be the equivalent of one another. And as he said, there are no human trails within close proximity to the treasure. So maybe he's helping to define what a human trail is as well. So Sir Crow is identified when the person I said, what do you think he means by simplify? That was Sir Crow from southern Indiana. And then he asks, how much imagination is required to find this treasure?
Well, there's definitely a suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
I can't believe there's a treasure out there. I can't believe nobody's found it in 8 years. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief involved.
So I would say that there is in order to find the treasure, you have to invest an amount of imagination equal to intellect. I don't think that it is 100% imagination. I don't think it's 100% intellect. I think that you have to apply them equally to the problem of resolving the clues in the poem and translating what you've resolved into physical objects. And to do that requires a certain amount of imagination, perhaps even creativity, which is different. But it shouldn't exclude intellect. You shouldn't tell yourself, I can do this with imagination alone, without practice and without using your intellect as well. So I would say when you asked, the question was how much imagination is required, I would say an amount of imagination equal to your intellectual application.
Well, and that makes sense if you look at where the quote comes from. Einstein, one of the most intelligent men we've known, and he had a large base of knowledge to work from in order to further imagine, what if this or what if that? But he would have never gone so far with his imagination if he didn't already have that huge base of knowledge to work from.
In addition to that, you've often heard me talk about experimentation, and most scientists, at least the ones that I've known or have read about, use the imaginative side of themselves to visualize the possibilities, right? So when and the best example is when Einstein established his theory that energy is equal to mass accelerated to the speed of light to the square, he spent the next 10 or 12 years looking for ways to employ experiments that would validate his theory. So what imagination in classic science, what imagination does for you is give you the ability to I don't want to use the same word, to build theories that you then have to validate through experimentation. And again, that's the imaginative versus the intellectual side. All scientists don't just imagine. Stephen Hawking spent a lifetime imagining things and then engaging various universities to validate what his beliefs were, what those theories might be, so that they can become practical. Because the difference between imagination and intellect is that imagination tends to be, and I'm not going to be critical here because I'd like to think of myself as an imaginative person, imagination tends to be impractical. Experimentation lets you find out whether or not imagination is indeed practical. We ran, let me give you another example. We ran an experiment this last week. I imagined that by putting up our videos from the previous week, we could get people in the chat room just talking to each other so that they had something to do on Saturday night. That's what I imagined. I ran the experiment, and the experiment told me it was totally impractical.
People have lives on Saturday nights.
Right, exactly. So we won't be doing that again.
I know I do.
But you need, it's necessary to get that data, right? It's necessary to implement your imagination in the form of an experiment so that you can collect data that you can analyze and determine what's the next thing that you need to imagine. And there is, in science, there is a very interesting progression between imagination, experimentation, analysis, then more imagination, et cetera, et cetera. But that's why experiments exist. And in the case of a searcher, your experimentation, your basis of experimentation is boots on the ground. If you stay home and do a lot of imagining, I can predict comfortably that you're not going to find the treasure without taking that imagination and experimenting and get the practical side of it. They are not independent of one another. You have to do them both in order to be successful. You have to apply them both in order to be successful.
And also in the chat room, we have Shannon Steele from Crystal River, Florida, and Kai, Kentucky. Chert guy. Chert is a kind of rock. And he says his name is Mike. Mike from Kentucky. Sea Monkey Vacation is giving us a quote from Forrest Fenn. If you knew the geographic location of each clue, it would be a map to the treasure.
Yes, that's true. But I'm going back to what you asked earlier. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you had a map with geographic locations, you can pinpoint them and turn it into a treasure map. The only way you're going to turn your map into a treasure map is to be boots on the ground to validate them, because I'm still of the opinion that there are no points represented by the clues on a high-resolution map. There are no names on a map that say Home of Brown or
Those
can be.
names are very specific to Fenn coming up with them.
Yeah.
Jan Schultz says, did Joel make it back, or is he waiting the 30 days with the chest? Joel is still out there.
As of last night, right? He was still out there.
Yeah, because we asked him if he wanted to be on our panel tomorrow night. He said he was out traveling still.
He was out traveling. So I got a question from the room. It's from Brian again. Do you think Forrest Fenn will be excited when someone finds the treasure. That would be a pure hypothesis on my part.
Right.
I think if it was Forrest Fenn, you can't help but be excited. At the same time, the idea that your story would last, dozens or hundreds or even thousands of years. So I think he's going to have the mixed emotions of, wow, this is really cool, and we're going to get a lot of media coverage. And then, oh, by the way, my family doesn't have to worry about it after I pass away, mixed with, I was hoping this was going to go 1,000 years. So I think it'll be mixed emotions. I certainly, if it had been me, I'd experience mixed emotion.
And vindication. I told you it was out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another part of it. You got something from the room?
Just reading through.
Okay. So, Mr. Eunice, call me Toby, please. Actually my
Mr.
soccer
Y.
teams
Mr.
didn't call me
Y.
Mr. Eunice. They call me Mr. Y. If I would send you a picture from Google Earth Pro with the picture of the chest and its exact coordinates on the screen, would you then agree to a 50-50 split with you responsible for the retriever? He didn't give me a name, but let's call you, let's see, he didn't say where he's from, Google. I'm sorry, we don't do that. We get probably 3 to 5 requests from various searchers asking for us to retrieve the treasure because they have the geographic coordinates. We have, this is our business, and we just can't take off. Our planning to go out and look for our own solution, to try and validate our own solution, has to be planned literally a month at least in advance. So we simply don't have the time and or the money to do that. In addition to that, it has the potential to compromise our own solution. So you can imagine if there was a situation where you sent me your solution, and then a month later we found the treasure, and then a month after that, when we announced it, you said, well, he did it with my solution. So we ask searchers not to do that, and we simply don't have the time to go out and look for other people's solutions on their behalf. But thank you. It's very kind of you to ask us. We appreciate people asking, but we simply can't do that. So, long question from Aaron in Tacoma. He says, page 111 of the Thrill of the Chase, Forrest asked the kids in the classroom if the bronze statue he was holding was hot or cold. The kids were surprised it was cold. In a warm room, he explained that it's because it's our hands that are actually warm. Am I the only one who thinks this is a hint to think outside the box when it comes to where warm waters halt? Aaron from Tacoma, Washington. I don't think, Aaron, you're the only one that has used that particular line in the book as a hint. We do not, but I know there are other people that has. So you can be comforted in knowing that no, you are not the only one. From Sir Crow, coming in again. Sir Crow, Southern Indiana. So you think he is teaching us the balance between knowledge and imagination? Interesting way to put that. I don't necessarily know that is his intent, to teach us the balance between knowledge and imagination. I think, if anything, especially in the upcoming chapter where we see the bells and jars and in the Dancing with the Millennium, I think he was very much oriented towards motivating the search community towards the use of imagination, not because it was more important to be imaginative rather than intellectual, but because I think he had concluded that we had moved away from the imaginative as a culture, perhaps even a race, that we had moved away more from the imaginative and to the practical and intellectual. And like he was suggesting, that we go out into the forest, because as a culture, perhaps even as a race, we have spent less time in the outdoors than we had in the past. So maybe what he's implying is that we've spent less time in the imaginative than we had in the intellectual or the practical. And as a recommendation, in the same way he suggests we go into the outdoors, perhaps he's suggesting we explore our imaginative side rather than trying to be practical. And because your first response to something like this is the practical. Well, that's crazy. Oh, well, that's you come up with all the what ifs, right? To create obstacles for yourself. So maybe as opposed to pushing us or suggesting that we had to be more imaginative, it was just like we are creatures of both imagination and intellect. And over the past, I'm going to say, half century, we have migrated, except for a very small group of people, we have migrated away from the imaginative and to the practical and intellectual. And perhaps he was just like he tries to push us out into nature. Maybe he's just trying to push us out into the imaginative.
We're getting into science equals MC squared, Schrodinger's cat. Maybe Schrodinger's cat's the one that you kidnapped.
Okay, long text message. I recall Forrest Fenn saying the person who finds the treasure will have solved the clues and go confidently to its location. But that seems to contradict the notion that you have to put boots on the ground to go from one clue to the next, sort of an iterative process involving multiple trips. Thoughts? The question and the previous one are from Shannon in Crystal River, Florida. Sorry, don't understand the @ sign or whatever. I'm new to chats. The @ sign is just what you printed right there in your text message. And if you precede a gypsy's kiss with that @ sign, if you do @ sign and then type the letter A, what pops up?
And a space.
And a space. What pops up is our name. You can click on that, and then when in the chat, it highlights that a gypsy's kiss for us in orange.
Yeah.
So we know that you're asking us a question. That's what the @ sign is all about. So, yeah, he said, he did say something like, and I don't know the exact quote, treasure will solve the clues and go confidently to its location. I still do not think you can solve the clues from your sitting at your desk. And I don't see how, considering there are 350,000 searchers looking for this treasure, supposedly. And over the past 8 years, apparently, no one has gone with any confidence. Because I've yet to see any indication that people actually come back from any of this saying, I think I'm closer. The closest we come to saying that is, I feel like we're closer. But we are not the kind of intellectually confident that it would require to find the treasure. So I don't see how you can gain confidence without going out into the field at least once. After you've worked out a solution, I strongly recommend that after you've worked out a solution, go out and attempt to implement that solution, because your experience will be what every first-time searcher's experience is, and that is, this is a bigger problem than you imagined, and your solution was crazy. I use the phrase crazy wrong. And I don't mean, it's not meant to be offensive. It's just what you discover. Everybody goes through it. And then you go back and say, well, let me get back to the basics, simplify, and figure out where those damn warm waters halt.
Waterman 699 says, about the Indian girl, if you can only get 2 clues using a map and computer, how do you marry the clues to places on a map?
Again, I'm going to repeat that. You marry them. I don't think you can marry them to places on the map. So this whole theory that you need a map to get to the clues, the locations, I am not of that opinion. I think you can identify the first 2 clues on the map, and then I think you have to be boots on the ground, literally Indiana Jones style, getting dirty and fighting off snakes and bears so that you can find those clues. Yeah, and cows.
No bears.
Cows. Dancing. It shouldn't be dancing with a millennium. It should be dancing around the cow poop.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, we spend more time fighting off snakes and cow poop than we do anything else.
Not poisonous snakes.
Yeah,
just
not
little
poisonous
grass snakes.
But I don't. You can marry them on a map, but I don't see how you can do that without being there and making an X on the map, right? So I found the home of Brown. It's right this place on the map, and because of that, you might be, predicting your line as where you're going down, because my guess is you're going to continue down the canyon in order to get to the treasure. But I don't think this is an exercise in mapping. I think it's an exercise in searching. He doesn't call the book is not called The Thrill of the Map. It's called The Thrill of the Chase. Get out there.
We have, I'm going to say this, I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I'll try. Memo Cubulus. I just joined. My question is, what are the 9 clues? Does anyone know exactly what they are?
Yes. Well, no, nobody knows exactly what they are. There are many of us that trust that we have identified the 9 clues. But for a good start, go to our blog, gypsieskiss.com, and follow. There's a sticky post on the top of the first page of that, and the post is entitled, "If you're new to the search, start here," something like that, and it explains what you have to know. And one of the recommendations, I think I make 10 steps that you have to take as a new searcher to get caught up in a very short period of time, and one of them is to review the poem, and that also, there's a link on that to the poem and our understanding of it. Now again, these are all our opinions, although if you go to that page, first page, gypsieskiss.com, top post, sticky post, follow the 10 instructions there, and if you're a new searcher, that's the fastest way to get caught up. It takes out all of the other sticky stuff.
Well, I'm not seeing any more at a Gypsy's Kiss orange highlighted.
Okay. Oops, I got one more here on the phone. Julia from Chicago. Hi, Toby. Would you or Shelley be willing to expand on the possibilities of using a sky map to solve some of the clues in a metaphysical way? You know, Julia, do you want to address that, or do you want me to take it first?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So, Julia, it was, I think, on Friday night that you brought that up as a possibility because we were busy planning for this week. I haven't had a chance to even look at that for a reasonable response to your question. I think it has some kind of potential, whether it is metaphysical or not, or perhaps just rather than metaphysical, imaginative. I think it's a very imaginative question, and I think it has some possibilities, but I can't tell you what they are, and we simply haven't done the research necessary to give you a credible answer to this question. But I promise you I will look into it the minute I get some time, because the question intrigued me. Okay?
And Marty Bird wants to know, have you met anyone that saw the chest before Forrest hid it? We have met people, but we haven't really gotten a chance to talk to them and ask them questions.
Yeah, Douglas Preston and Michael McGarity, who were with him at the Collected Works, and who both say at that book signing back in October 2013 that they had seen the treasure. And there have been interviews, independent interviews, in which people have said they have seen the treasure. When I questioned whether or not the treasure was hidden in 2003 and 2009, Dale Neitzel contacted Fenn's nephew, Creighton, and Creighton said that he recalls seeing the treasure on Fenn's dining room table back in 2006, something like that. So there are many people, at least a handful that I'm aware of, people who saw the treasure before it was hidden. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm done here, and I'm going to turn off the hotline, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
because it's 2 hours, an hour and 18 minutes so far.
Oh, that's not too bad, yeah. So just a reminder, if you do call the hotline, you can leave a voicemail, and I'll play those voicemails on Friday night for a Friday night Fandango and address them then. You can send a text at any time, but again, right now, after getting them in the room, I let those texts sit until Friday night, and then I'll address them then. Okay?
Okay.
So we're glad you guys are using this. I wish we'd get more calls. Davio, thank you for calling. I really appreciate it. If I haven't said this before, I really appreciate getting your calls.
Yes,
and
it
having
takes
the
a little bit of
conversation.
courage to make that phone call.
Yeah, exactly. Get online, baby. Okay.
But Toby's always nice to everybody who calls, so don't be afraid.
I'm actually a nice person. I'm not as mean as I look.
He's always professional, and he's always nice. So.
And I've done this a lot, so I know it's better when we have a good conversation. Unless you get crazy, and then I'll just have to.
He's still nice, even if you're crazy. He's had a lot of crazy calls in the past.
Yeah.
All right. So coming up this week, tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Wednesday, September 26th, we have our panel, The 9 Clues Not in Fenn's Poems. So we're going to ask our panel members what they think are some of the most important clues out there, or hints, if you want to call them that, that are not in the poem.
Okay. You know what? I forgot to ask you. When I was, I assumed that all these connections are working. When I was listening to Davio, you could hear him?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. I just wanted to make sure.
And then on Thursday, September 27th at 1 p.m., we'll have our Thrill of the Chase book club. We're on chapter 24, Dancing with the Millennium.
And I believe this is up there. It's one of the top 5 chapters, probably, in my opinion, number 2, behind the one in which the poem resides. But I think this is one of the top 5 chapters in the book. And Shelley's done a great analysis. We will be taking calls on that day. We will not be taking calls during the panel because I like the panel to move along at a pretty rapid pace, and I don't want to interrupt it with a call.
But you can send texts during the panel.
Yeah, you can send texts.
Mm-hmm. And Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, The Softer Side After Dark. We're going to be talking about seasons of the heart and how we can process our emotions so that we can let go of them and always return back to the door that leads to happiness. Wouldn't that sound cool?
It does sound cool. And you can actually see the nice Toby on that channel.
Nice Toby.
The nice.
Friday, 1 o'clock p.m., September 28th. It's all about you. We'll have a new interview with a searcher coming out. Will be a video. Won't be live this time. And that will appear on YouTube at 1 o'clock on Friday.
By the way, we'd like your opinion, again, experimentation and collecting data. We'd like your opinion on the matter of whether the It's All About You interview should be live or pre-recorded. I have, to this point, after I decided to do one of them, I gave this searcher the option of one or the other, and the searcher chose pre-recorded. But that part of it was because trying to get, I have to get people Friday at 1 o'clock, and for some people that's hard. But put your opinion either in the chat or in the comments below what you like better, the live It's All About You interviews or the pre-recorded.
And then 7 o'clock p.m. Friday night, September 28th, Forrest Fenn Friday Fandango, starring your favorite DJ, Toby Eunice. He'll have open text and phone lines. He'll be there to answer all your questions and be very entertaining at the same time.
Well, you're making a lot of promises there.
And I'll be in the chat room with you guys.
Shelley would produce from the chat room, and we'll just take Q&A. It was a lot of fun last week. This is going to be our 3rd iteration of this. It is a lot of fun for me, and like I said, I hope it's as much fun for the people that are watching. I have to tell
you, one of Toby's very favorite things to do is to be asked questions and have the opportunity to answer them fully. He just loves that. He just lives for it. So
I
know he's going to keep this going as long as you guys are there.
Yeah, and it is also there's a part of this that's learning for me, because in the questions that you were asked, not only do I have to think about them and come up with an answer for you at that point in time, it forces me to go back and do some additional research and make sure what I told you, it refines my thinking by causing me to perform additional research just by the question. And so there's a Socrates approach to teaching was to ask his students questions. And so in this case, in the case of the Forrest Fenn Fandango, you are the teacher and I am the student. And I like that. I really like being in that position, so I have to think about all these things. And again, it inspires me to do additional research. Okay.
Is there anything else?
I think that's it for...
Okay. Well, since we're talking about what's coming up next week at this time, 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to have a new program. It's going to be more of the softer side, and this program will be What Women Want. And I hope that you'll tune in at 2:30 on Tuesdays to my channel, thesofterside.me, and Toby and I will be talking about what women want.
Wait a minute. I didn't know I was involved in that.
Obviously you are.
So I get to tell women what they want? Is that what
No. You get to provide what it is that women want. Someone to listen.
Oh, okay. All right.
Women love want to be heard. They want someone to listen. So that's what your job is, listening.
Okay.
So that's starting next Tuesday, October 2nd at 2:30 in the afternoon, the softer side.
Oh, we're going to go right after this show?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all I got.
All
No more
right.
questions in the room.
We're good.
Let me just look at that data right there real quick.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much for being here, for all your questions and comments. And we know you have a choice when you pick out what you're going to watch on YouTube and in the FenTube community. We appreciate you choosing A Gypsy's Kiss today. And for Gypsy's Kiss, the blog, I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.